How much is that?
And welcome to the Podcast Editors Mastermind, the only show for the business of podcast editing. I'm Carrie Caulfield-Eric, and today I'm here with my co-host below me.
I'm Brian Ensminger, and to my side is...
Daniel Abendroth.
So we have with us Alexandra Stenett from Listeners to Clients. And we are going to be talking about rates with her. But in case you don't know Alexandra from the Facebook communities, because she is all over the place in the editing community and a great help to podcast editors. She is the co-founder of Listeners to Clients and a podcast editor, of course. And she has a background as a chartered accountant and director of operations for a media company. And now, of course, she helps podcast editors become confident business owners. She and her husband, Paul, created one of the first podcasts in the Caribbean. And they saw a massive positive impact that it had on the community. So that's why they started their company. And she enjoys singing off-key her Sesame Street songs with her daughter. And you can find her and Paul watching everything on Netflix. And by the way, they're in Jamaica. So welcome, Alexandra.
Thanks, guys.
We are so glad to have you here. And I'm really excited about this topic because I want to start this show off today. Why do I keep saying today?
Because it's today.
It is today, but I feel like that's not what we do, right? Because we're podcasters. No, I want to talk about this thread from, oh, goodness gracious. Now, I had it and I lost it.
Oh, that Twitter thread?
On me. Yeah, the Twitter thread. And I'm not going to. Okay, so in that thread, this audio person talked about rates, right? And how, or what the industry standards were in terms of rates for the different jobs: producer, editor, tape sync, which is, for those of you who don't know, is just recording the audio. And how if you are not charging like within these standards, you are hurting the industry. And if you are employing somebody and not charging these or not paying these rates, you are hurting the industry. So let's start with you, Alexandra. Did you saw that thread, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What are your thoughts?
Let me step into the minefield.
Okay.
So,
Yes.
Sweet.
I don't disagree with what they're saying, but at the same time, when you look at the rates that they proposed, I think someone had like asked a specific question. What would you do? What would you charge for like a chat show, hour long, or I think maybe it was 90 minutes? And I think the rate came to like $800. The recommendation that was being made by the original poster. I'm just not sure that that's really practical. I think it's one of those things where if you're working maybe with B2B, you're working with companies, you're working in the industry, maybe you're working at a big podcasting company, definitely charge these rates. But I don't know if for the average podcast editor, solopreneur out there, are they going to get a lot of business charging $800 per episode? I feel like there's somewhere in between. Like, I don't think you have to charge $50 an episode, but I feel like, and I don't know if it's fair to say everyone should be charging these rates or you're bringing down the whole industry. That's my thing. I think it's a bit extreme.
Yeah, so I'm inclined to agree with you. Like, I like the idea of continuing to upscale the industry, but at the same time, when I think about, let's make it something physical, like buying a car, there's a difference in price between a BMW and a Kia, and there should be. And so that doesn't mean that there's no place for the Kia in the market. And it doesn't mean that the Kia should aspire to charge what you would pay for a BMW or a Mercedes or whatever expensive car people like now. I don't think that that's necessarily a fair analogy. At the same time, I do understand that tension because there is a lot of pressure to turn something like this, that is a relatively new industry, at least in terms of this expression, into something that becomes a race to the bottom. And I equally don't like that. And I don't know that I have the answer. So I'm going to stop talking and let you guys jump in.
I think when it comes to like this conversation of like $800 an episode versus like $5 for an hour, the middle ground is when I think like $800, I'm thinking like BBC and NPR and like Gimlet Media, that they're putting, months of research and like editing into their episodes. Like in that kind of situation, that makes sense. But if I'm doing a 30-minute solo podcast with one speaker who's like in a relatively well-treated room, like it's not going to take me nearly as long to justify, an $800 rate.
And I think that when you're working with independent podcasters, right, when that is your customer base, how many of them are going to have 800? So they're doing 4 episodes a month, and that's
32.
32. I was going to say 36, but right. So they're going to spend that kind of money getting their podcast edited. Probably not. And there needs to be people to service them, right? They just because they don't have $800 to pay an episode doesn't mean they don't deserve help or can't, pay a decent rate to get help. And I was thinking about it. You made the car analogy, Brian, and I was thinking in terms of like, okay, so there's Family Dollar, there's Walmart, but there are all sorts of other like boutique and luxury shops too that we, can go to. So there needs to be a price point for everybody.
I was thinking that what you said with the car and Family Dollar and stuff, I don't mean it mean, but like, I don't think somebody has to service every level, because the reality of the matter is that you're not required to have a podcast editor. If you can't pay an editor, you can edit it yourself or leave it unedited. So I don't think it has to. There's this argument sometimes in some of the podcast groups that you see, which is like, I'm not making any money from my show. How dare you charge more than 1 cent per hour? And it's like, if I want to get a fancy hairstyle, the hairdresser isn't going to be like, well, whatever you can afford, you stay at home and you do it yourself unless you can afford somebody. So I do think, we have to find that balance. And I don't think we should feel compelled to be like, gosh, we have to be accessible to everybody in the world who doesn't want to edit their own thing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Right.
We have a comment from the one and only Steve Stewart. One person's average rate can be drastically different from another based on their perception. What I charge seems to be more than average per survey we do every year, but it's an incredible amount to someone in the Philippines. Cost of living can play a huge part in this.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, where you live and also like your skill level. If you're just starting out as an editor, then maybe you can't. You might not be able to do like an NPR Gimlet Media style kind of.
Well, so I push back on that.
Okay.
I have worked with a lot of freelance editors, right? And so I have gotten a lot of pitches and seen a lot of rates, and some of these editors and some I know they're new, and I'm like, whoa. Like, wow, that's a big rate.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And I think it's more of the like based what Steve said about perception, right? That sometimes that rate is just, I don't know. I don't want to say arbitrary, but but it makes me wonder how people figure this stuff out. Like, how do they decide what their rate is?
Well, why can't it be arbitrary? Because my thing is, if I want to charge $400 for a 15-minute solo and somebody wants to pay me for it, I don't think that I am wrong, if that makes sense. Like, that's an extreme example, and I wish somebody would pay me $400 for 15 minutes. So,
Me
but
too.
like, if you have a market for it, you're not tricking anybody. It's not like I'm saying I'm doing something that I'm not doing. If that's what I quote, and you're like, yeah, that's fine, then it's fine. The problem I have with the cost of living example, is that I think it has to be down to the person. So let me talk from other third world people. In Jamaica, our cost of living is very close to the US. So it doesn't really apply to us, as people don't really expect that lower cut as other countries. But if you're in the Philippines and you want to charge the same rates as somebody in the US, I believe that's your right. And I think there's sometimes an argument of, if your cost of living is lower, then you should charge less. But I don't necessarily think that you need to, because the value of it to your clients is the same. Meaning, if you have clients in the US, obviously, if you have clients locally, it might be different because maybe they can't afford it. But if you have clients in the US, they get the same amount of value if I do it as if Brian does it, as if anybody else does it. So don't feel like you have to charge less based on where you are.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, and myself included, editors get hung up on like trying to justify their rate. And really, like, it just kind of like you're saying, it comes down to, is somebody willing to pay the rate? If so, then it's a fair rate.
Agreed.
I would agree with that. I mean, that's the justification that I have for my rate, which is not at all exorbitant. It's people are paying this. So it is clearly worth this because people are paying this. Now, am I leaving money on the table? Possibly, probably.
Well, I want to go back because Kareem had a question for Carrie. How much is WoW in your example for new people doing editing?
So above $350 an episode. Which and I've had that. So I've had that rate like $300, $400 an episode, where I've I kind of let clients go and said, that I posted like a job thing that I was finding editors for them. And I was like, whoa, they're not gonna, like, I didn't get paid that much. They're not gonna do that. So, and for Kareem asked for how much for audio. I mean, we're talking just a normal 30 to 60 minute interview show. Pretty easy.
Mark,
intro, outro. Oh, that was
Mark.
Yeah,
Mark.
it was Mark.
Sorry, Mark. Yeah, super simple. I mean, something that only took me like, 2 hours, after being with them for a while and them becoming better speakers. Something that only took 2-3 hours at the most to put together. And yeah, I don't think that they're paying $100 or more an hour. Like, that just wasn't, and just wasn't in their budget. Okay, so Brian, you had this really awesome question that I completely don't remember now.
Oh, that's fine. I got ahead of us, apparently. That's no problem. So part of me is, I'm thinking through this upscaling, right? Because I do want to continue to increase my rates. And it's a bit of a challenge, right? There's a little bit of an internal struggle to increase the rates, but also there's a matter of finding the right clients. And so I'm wondering, like, based on your experience, how much of that, I'll call it struggle, it might not be, to increase rates is people's head trash, the stories they tell themselves, and how much of it is just being able to find and connect with the right clients?
Okay. I feel like 100% is the head trash, because this is something that I still struggle with, but over the years I've had to push myself, because when I started out, my rates were really, really low, simply because I had no idea.
Okay, wait. So I'm going to put your feet to the fire. How low were your rates?
So originally free was the first ones. The first clients, I was like, dude, I'll do a free episode for you. Everything, just please come work with me. And then after that, I was charging, I think, $60 for an hour-long episode with show notes. So I would say that's pretty low. And at that time, I was slow.
I'd say some of us here charge less for the same work.
For an hour with show notes? I mean, gosh.
We don't need to get into what I used to
charge.
That's
like 6 or 7 hours of work at that time.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
And I did it. I was thankful, of course, because I had I only experience with doing personal projects. I didn't have experience with clients at the time. And actually, one of those clients is still my client now, and I've gotten her up to a normal rate, a human one that people could live on. But what happened with most of these, and the reason why I think I was able to adjust the rates, is that I they know what I'm doing is not just editing. So I think it's a bit of, if you position yourself to clients as like, yeah, cut the audio for you and put it on Libsyn. It's not very exciting. I'm not really wanting to pay you that much to just cut the audio. I can do that. Like they'll think to themselves. But then you it's kind of like what Daniel said. I think that we're trying to justify our rate to ourselves so much. But when you really look at it, let's break it down. I don't like doing hourly because the more I do this, the faster I am. So should I charge less because I'm faster? No. But when you look and say, if I was working in a job, doing something else, and I was getting paid this amount, would I be happy? Would I say, yeah, this is a job that I want to keep because the salary is actually good and sustaining me? And if the answer is no, then your rates are too low. And if your client's not willing to pay it, I'm not just talking about like picking an arbitrary number and you want to be the richest person in the world. You know yourself, you're an honest person within reason. I think sometimes it's about pushing through the discomfort. I think a lot of times it's about pushing through the discomfort because every time I've asked for a rate increase, it has been horribly uncomfortable. And then I'm so glad when it's done. One of the times the client was like, I just don't have the budget for it. But let's just talk open numbers. She was paying me $90. I was writing blog posts for her, like full on blog posts, thousands of word blog posts, editing her hour-long show, doing her social media, all these wonderful. And she was using her Yetis backwards and everything was awful.
Oh, no.
But it was $90 per episode. And I know for a fact she has a budget. It was not like I feel so sorry for her and her sorry circumstances. And she said she just doesn't have the budget. She's going to get a VA to do it for $12 an hour. So she got a VA to do it for $12 an hour because it just didn't make sense for me anymore because it was so consuming. But that's something to say from a lofty position of being able to let go of a client. When you're just starting out, you might not have that flexibility. So a part of it also is acknowledging where you are. Can you afford to lose a client when you bring up this conversation to the client? Because I think you kind of have to be willing to say, well, if you can't increase my rate, then bye. If you're going to put it like that to them.
Yeah, you have to be ready for them to say no. I mean, that's their choice, obviously, is for them to say no. So curious, how did you settle on that original rate, that first $60?
The first $60, I think the person said to me they had $60. I don't think there was anything on my end. It was like, this is my budget. I'm like, thank you. whatever. I'll just do everything for you for this amount of money. I genuinely did not know that podcast editing was a field when I first started out. So until I found Podcast Editors Club, I was like, wow, look, other people are doing this.
So, is it Kareem?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So he wants to know if Alexandra edits video podcasts. And if so, what do you charge for that?
So Miss $90 also had a video.
Wow.
I don't edit video anymore because video, I find, is worse than audio. I don't like doing it. I find it to be extremely time consuming. And I think you would charge more. I don't know. That's just my thought on it. But I don't offer it. So I'm not the best person to ask about video.
Well, Daniel, you do video, don't you?
A little bit. So I'll typically do, I think I charge like 1.5 times my rate. And I don't do like complex video editing. So like I'll clean up the audio and then I'll go through it and just make what I'll do is I'll listen. So I'll edit the audio first, like my normal, and I'll be listening for any major edits or mistakes. And then I'll make a note of those. And then in the video, I'll go and I'll cut just those parts. So I don't go through and cut out the ums and like all the little mistakes in video because then you're left with just, a vlogger, YouTuber style thing. So I just go in any major things, I cut those out and then render. Yeah, so 1.5 times my rate.
Oh, what you mean in your audio rate? 1.5 times your audio rate?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
So in that scenario, you'd be charging, let's just say, $100 for the audio edit and then an additional $150 for the video edit?
So it'd be $150 to do both.
Okay. And we're not quoting his rates. We're just using that as an example in case you're listening and trying to figure Daniel's rates out because I don't know what they are. I'm just making stuff up.
No, I don't know what we may be in a mastermind, but we don't necessarily share everything. Some things we keep quiet. So, all right. So that's how you started with your your first rate of $60, Alexandra.
Right.
Oh, and sorry, back to video. Because Mark made a comment, you can definitely cut the video. You don't make as many cuts, but you cut back and forth between shots. And so this is assuming it's a single track video. So if you get like a zoom or it's like mixed down and it automatically cuts back and forth between the speaker.
For your rate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So how then, once you got into podcast editing and got your feet under you, how then did you go about determining what your packages were and how much you were going to charge people?
Okay, so to be transparent, when I just started out, I had, I think, 2 one-on-one clients, but I was also working as a subcontractor with Brittany Felix. And if anybody knows Brittany is like charged.
Brittany fan here.
So like,
Yeah.
so I must have told Brittany something about my rates, and she's like, no, like she's like, I know I'm paying you, but like that doesn't make any sense. So she was the first inkling I had of like, oh really? That's too little? Who knew? I thought that should be, I was so excited for my $90. But yeah, based on that, I honestly create packages. I started with it based on what my clients needed, because my approach was always custom, because I only work with clients who have businesses associated with their podcast. And I find that makes things so much easier because they take it really seriously and they know what they want to do with their show. So these are people who they know, okay, I want to do my podcast like this. I want to have show notes. I want to have whatever. And they value my input. That was the game changer, working with the people who value the input. Because when I was working with the $90 and the $70 person, they just wanted somebody who would upload their stuff. Like just put it wherever it needs to go. That was what they cared about. When I started to really package up my things and be able to charge proper rates, those are the people who are like, I want to work with an expert because I want my podcast to succeed because it's for my business. So for that reason, I have never worked with a hobby podcast and I'm afraid of doing so.
Yeah, I know it's common, but like the people that pay the least expect the most and give you the most headaches.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think very rarely will they grow with you, right? Because that part does happen. But I love this because what I'm hearing from you, Alexandra, is the first thing you did was figure out who you wanted to work with. And so you got your ideal client down, and then you can court them, right? And set those packages and rates that works for all of you.
Right.
Yeah.
One advantage that I had though was that I'm an accountant. I was working at an auditing firm for years. So I came into this business saying, I'm not trying to make a loss. So from day one.
You mean you don't want to pay to work for somebody?
And the other thing was that there was no other income. So at the time, my husband was laid off. And so this was it. So I couldn't afford to be like, oh, I'll just have this one client for like $50 and it would be fine. Like that worked for like a month on savings. But we knew we had to be like, set up the business in a way that can sustain us. And luckily, because of my background, I was able to not be afraid of the numbers. So little things I put in place. So I knew I wanted it to be packages. It had to be packages because I didn't want to deal with, okay, your audio is 35 minutes this month versus your audio is 37 minutes next month. And then this one is this. I couldn't deal with this admin burden of like getting into the nitty-gritty because I know I don't want to be petty with clients because I don't want my clients to be petty with me. So I don't want my clients to come back and be like, oh, I paid for a 45-minute audio, but my audio is 35, so I need a discount, right? So I'm not going to be petty with them on the other end. So I try to put everything in packages and be like, I'm a podcast person, don't worry about it. But that means I have to put the cushion in there. But people are willing to pay for the cushion for the comfort of knowing that I'm there. If they want to send me 10 emails or 0 emails. And the other thing I did was that everybody had to pay me up front. So from my first client, Brittany Felix is the only person that has not paid me upfront, and that's because she's Brittany. So she got an exception. But everybody else, from even when I was brand new and people were like, you can't do that. Nobody will pay you upfront. All my clients pay me at the beginning of the month, and it has never been a problem. And I did that because I knew I need my money to live. So I can't wait for net 30 to hope that you pay me on time, and then my electricity is cut off because you didn't.
So Wait, tell us what net 30 is for those of us who aren't accountants.
So net 30 is when you send your invoice and they pay you after, they have up to 30 days to pay you, which really means they're going to pay you on the 30th day or maybe after. So that's, I think, very typical in corporates. And that's also why I chose not to work with corporates, because my one experience trying to get a, like answering a proposal or something for a corporate, the proposal process was so painful. I said, I don't want to go any further because it's just my personality. It's nothing against them in general, but I know what I want to do, and admin burden, it's not for me. So I'm the person who wants to send I want to send 6 exclamation marks and 10 emojis in my emails. Not be like, good morning, ma'am. Here's your invoice attached.
Okay, well, you can do both. I'm here to say.
You can.
You can do both.
If you find the right clients.
If you find the right clients, you find the right end, it is a little less painful. But yes, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I've only got one client that I work with that has net 30 terms, and that's because it is a corporate client where their accounts payable process just takes that long. Right. And because I work in a big company for my day job, I get it, right? I get these invoices from companies that have done work for us, and it takes me 2 days every time to figure out how to just approve the stupid invoice, because first I have to go and find where they moved did you receive this part? And yes, I received this, and then go, it's very convoluted. So I get it, but it's also as a small business owner, I can't carry every client for 30 days. In fact, most of my clients are either paid up front or I might carry them for a week to allow it to accrue, but then I have their credit card information. So when I bill them, I can just literally charge them then, and it's cash in hand for me.
I like that.
But yeah, terms are something. In fact, I heard, Carrie, you shared this, the thing about imposter syndrome not being a thing. That was a YouTube video that Marcus DePaula was involved with. And I was really surprised. I went to her website, and the way it's set up is you don't do anything with her until you've paid. If you want to book them to record your thing, the payment is built into the process of booking. And so she doesn't do net anything. It's either paid up front or paid when you buy it. And I'm like, this is mind blowing. I didn't know we were allowed to do this. So I'm trying to think, can I restructure my process?
I do that with coaching. Most of it, except for with Just Busters, because they're my special people. You pay up front, and you buy your sessions up front, and then you can book your time.
Yeah, I definitely do that with coaching. I was thinking more about the editing, but yeah. Definitely. No, I actually only have one client that pays up front, but I work with a few companies, and I'm really lucky, and I don't have to wait 30 days for the payment. Right. But I do have to wait for that approval time. And I'm like, Brian, you're the guy. I'm cursing every Yeah. And you know what? As the guy on the inside of the company, I'm also the guy cursing.
Right.
I mean, I'll share this. We were trying to work with a company where we'd been working with them on a proposal for 3 months. And when we finally got to the process of signing the proposal, our internal process changed and their internal process changed. And it took us another 2 months just to get the proposal approved. We had to resubmit the whole thing. So I get it, but I don't want to deal with it as a small business owner.
Right.
Although I started working for a company that uses bill.com. And let me tell you, I have never been paid so fast by a company in my life. I mean, it's 2-3 days. What is this witchcraft?
Yeah, Steve Stewart said, I like the idea of collecting payment prior to the service, but that doesn't work for me. I like to work towards the reward of getting paid for a job well done.
So Steve's going to pay the money or get the money and spend it all and not...
Something tells me Steve's more responsible than that.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. Well, that's where, thinking that's where he gets all those records from.
Well, you see, that's why I feel like your rates are definitely trial and error. There's nothing around it. It's just trial and error because you won't know you're undercharged necessarily until you're undercharged. Or Steve wouldn't know that he likes it this way unless he tried it. So, don't be worried if you've been charging badly so far.
In the Facebook group, there was actually somebody who posted that they were charging, I think, $35 an episode, and asked if that was a good rate. And everybody came on and said, oh, no, charge more. But I didn't want him to feel bad. So I posted a very positive message to go along with that, because you shouldn't feel bad, because we found this out the hard way usually too. I mean, and you came in as an accountant, Alexandra. So, you saw what, the money in and out. But I will ask this: what numbers should you be taking into account when you are setting your rates? Like, what numbers should we know?
Well, I think the first thing you need to start with is how much does it cost you to run your business? And I think sometimes I just made a post about it. I think it's really hard when you're a service-based person, and especially if you're a solopreneur where your cost is yourself. It's not like a product where you're like, oh, I paid this much for the base material. You're kind of going into it saying it's free. It's just my time. I would be doing nothing otherwise. But you need to start from a place of saying, how much does it cost to run your business? Are you paying software subscriptions? Are you paying for internet, I should hope? Are you paying other office expenses? And also like your salary. Your salary doesn't have to be super high, but like how much do you need to make every month to pay your bills, to pay your taxes, all of that. And use that as your baseline. And then from there, of course, then you start thinking about profit. But let's say all of those expenses come to $1,000. You need to think about how many clients can you reasonably work on, because all of that money that you need every month is not going to come from one client. So you have to think about splitting it. And if you can only take 5 clients, you can only work on 5 clients, then that $1,000 needs to come from the 5 clients. There's no way around it. That's just the math of it. So you need to think, compare how much money you need to be making per month in terms of your business expenses and your salary. I think that's a good starting place. And then you want to think about things like, of course, your profit, because other investments you want to make in your business to add on top of that. Like when I say salary though, let me take a sidebar. Remember, you need things like health insurance, other stuff that assume that you are self-employed and you're not working at a company that's still paying those stuff for you. Like, don't underestimate the stuff that you need to pay. Your bills, your Netflix, all of these things. Like your company income is not your income. So really sit down and calculate what your salary needs to be and add that on top of your other expenses like your Adobe or whatever else you're paying to say, all right, I need X amount per month.
And I think that's where that profit first conversation that we had with Carolyn Rivera several months ago comes into play. And you go, okay, if my operating expenses can be 30% of my revenue, then you know that, you need to have living expenses plus 30% or whatever, plus taxes or whatever. Like that has to be what you bring in. And then the question is, what can you do that delivers enough value, in quotes, to the right people to do that, I think.
Or maybe you need to work with more clients. Maybe you were so comfortable just having 5 clients, and maybe you actually need to like stretch yourself and do 6 clients because you are really fancy and you want to have all the streaming services.
I do. I want to have
the Hulu without ads.
Exactly.
Sometimes you need like Discovery Plus so you can watch all the like murder shows and ghost shows. So
yeah. I just wanted to say, you brought up a comment a while ago about charging in US dollars. Like, please.
Yes. So there's a comment from Helen King saying, this is a conversation I need right now. I have completely undercharged and I am now feeling it. I also made the mistake of not charging in US dollars for US clients.
So I don't know where you're located, Helen, but
she's in New Zealand.
Oh, okay. I'm going to say definitely. Don't worry about it. We've all been there. But going forward, you charge in either, I charge all my clients in US. The ones in Canada and the US, in England, I also charge them in US just because that's how I think of my business revenue in US dollars. So I'm not trying to deal with exchange rates. I know how much I need to make at the end of the day in US dollars, and you don't want to be at the mercy of the economy changing the rate on you. So whatever is more secure for you, make sure you're billing in that currency. And don't worry about the fact that it's not your home currency, that your clients don't care, honestly.
I would echo that. I don't really have any international clients right now, but I have all of my accounting set up with US dollars as my unit of measure. And then all of my contracts just say all rates are in US dollars. Because otherwise, like, I can't imagine trying to charge pounds to this one and crowns to this one. Like, I'd lose my mind. And then US dollars versus, I don't know whatever they use in South Africa. I can't remember what like that would just drive me. I'd lose my mind. It's worse than time zones for me.
Yeah, I don't even quite follow this conversation. Like,
Yeah,
I
I bill in U.S. dollars, and I let the credit card company handle whatever the
Right.
magic of conversion.
And I pay in US dollars too. Like,
Yep, same.
It's just, it just simplifies everything. So,
Oh well, they might be paying in their own currency, but I'm getting the U.S. dollars.
right.
Yep.
Well, I know
Right.
I know that the foreign clients do pay in their. So like I have to charge people through PayPal because Stripe is not available in my country. So
Oh,
That's terrible.
I'm saying, and my PayPal rate, I'm just side note, my PayPal rate is 5.4% and 39 cents. So that's really ridiculous.
That's terrible.
It's
That is.
horrifying. And there is literally no alternative unless it's going to be like a bank transfer, which the rates are even worse. So anyway, that was a side note. But PayPal, I bill them. It's a subscription because I make everybody pay at the beginning. I bill everybody in US dollars. So I don't even know how much Canadian or how much pounds they're paying. I know I'm getting the same amount of US dollars every month. So stick to your US if you have US clients or other
Yeah.
countries.
Do you add in that merchant fee that PayPal charges you into your client's fee?
I do now. I didn't think of it at first. So I weep for those clients that I didn't consider it. But I do know. But my clients don't know what I have in my fee. I just, whatever I quote, I make sure that I can afford to lose that 6%, call it,
Right.
of it.
Right. Yeah. That's good because that's something I didn't think about at first either.
Yeah.
That's one of your business expenses, your merchant fees and your bank fees.
I was actually looking at bank fees just today, and I was like, on the one hand, I'm like, that's kind of a lot of money. And on the other hand, I'm like, that's a small percentage of a lot of money. I feel pretty good.
Yeah.
I feel pretty good about the amount of money that generated the requirement that I give that much in merchant fees.
Yeah. It's kind of nice to look at it and be like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, let's just like rough numbers say it's like 2.5% or 3%. I feel pretty good about the other 97% that made that possible.
Mhm.
I like that.
Yeah, but I really love direct deposit. That's my favorite.
So I know a little bit ago we were talking
Okay.
about
How are we?
so Alexandra, you pay your clients have to pay you before you do the work. Whereas like I'm the opposite. I charge after. So I bill on the first of the month for the previous month's work. And the benefit, for one, that's how I've always done it. And now I thought about flipping it, but the idea of like going to my clients like, all right, so I needed to pay last month's work, and also next month. Like that's just a really uncomfortable conversation I don't want to have. But then I also have like add-on services and like other things. So it's easier for me to like be able to like handle all that at the end and just kind of bill as well. But I also have packages like it's just a flat rate up to like a certain amount of time, which is really nice because then I can through my accounting software send out automated invoices, recurring invoices, and then the client can choose to set up automatic payments. So I have a number of clients that on the first of the month, my like all that money is sitting there ready for me to take it.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say that for my monthly clients, I have mine set up the same as what you do, except I bill at the first of the month. Right?
For
So
the
my
previous month?
No, I bill at the first of the month for this month, right? So all of my clients are paid in advance on a recurring invoice, and none of them really do any add-ons because I don't really have any. Like my only add-on would be you sent me more audio. I can invoice that off cycle. That's not a problem because I don't do like moving wave graphics or anything like that they might say I want one for this but not this. But then the way I frame it up to them is, hey, this is a risk sharing thing. If you pay at the beginning of the month, you get the same rate every month, no matter how many weeks there are. If you want to pay per episode, I don't get paid till later. So the risk is really on me. So you don't get that discount anymore. Right. So if it's a weekly client, that means they get 4 free episodes a year if they pay in advance. And if not, the rate per episode is the same. They just don't get the free ones anymore.
Yeah, that's how I framed the advanced payments to my clients. There's some clients who didn't want it though. They wanted it to go episode per episode.
I think I don't know. I think I've just been really lucky. I've never had a client push back on the payment at the beginning. And maybe it's because I don't frame it as an option. I'm just like, yeah. So Bill, these are my packages, $10, and you pay on the first of the month. And I've it's set up in a way where my concern was just what happens if they miss an episode. And in all these years, I've only ever had one client who didn't use up her monthly allocation, and we established from the beginning that the rate is a rate. You don't get a refund if you forget to send it to me or whatever. But I also give them an out. Like if they're going on a season break, they just tell me, once they tell me 30 days in advance, it's fine. I'll just pause their subscription. So like I have clients now who are on monthly break. They're not paying me during their break because I think that's like a bit mean to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll do that if a client goes on vacation. I'll just be like,
right.
all right, we're gonna pause.
Yeah. I think for me, the only ones that have really pushed back are the ones that aren't sure if they want to keep the same schedule all the time. And those are the ones that tend to go with the per episode billing. Sorry, Daniel, I jumped in on you.
No, you're fine. I just wanted to point out something really smart that Alexandra says, like, you don't give them the option. Whenever you like talk to your client about like raising rates or whatever, like having that confidence and being like, all right, here, and go back to Brittany Felix's episode. I think we talked about this. She's like really good about this. It's like, this is my new rate in the story. You don't hesitate. You don't give them outs. You don't get wishy-washy. You just like, this is my rate. And if you don't leave room to negotiate, then they're not going to take it.
Right.
On this note, Alexandra, how did you go about raising your rates for your clients? Like, what does that conversation look like for you?
So mostly I have ended up raising the rates for new clients rather than raising the rates on existing clients. But I have one client who was with me from the garbage rate, and now she pays a good rate. God bless her. But that client taught me a lot because I realized that she was always nice. I never had a problem with her, but she was just doing what I said. So if I said it costs $90, and every time she came back to me, it was like, oh, add this, add this, add this, and I just did it. I mean, she's not doing anything wrong, right? But when I actually pushed back, she was with her. I said to her that, look, this was the scope of what we started with. It was supposed to be, I don't remember the details, but let's say it was supposed to be 30 minutes of you alone and basic show notes. And now we're doing interviews for an hour and detailed blog posts. So I no longer can offer you that full service at this price. And X is a new price. And she actually said that it was way out of her budget because I was doing a lot of stuff for her and I priced out all of them. So like I was doing audiograms, I was doing social media captions, I was doing all sorts of stuff. And what we ended up doing was paring back the stuff down to just what she really wanted, which was the audio editing and the blog posts, and agreed on a rate that we could both feel comfortable with. So I'm not against negotiating. I'm not saying like stand on a hard line and never negotiate. But like it went from being I'm dreading doing her work every week because I'm doing so much for so little to like now I love working on her show because I'm not feeling like, wow, you're taking advantage of me. Because she really wasn't taking advantage of me. I just never pushed back. And I think it's very easy because it's like scope creep. It's just one little thing at a time. And then before you know it, it's a whole new show you're editing for the same old rate. So I think just having these honest conversations about, I think it's a little bit hard, I will say, to like increase your rate if nothing you're doing has changed. I don't know how you have that conversation. Like, this is what we agreed on, but like,
but now I want more money.
Yeah. Right. Unless time has passed. I will say if a lot of time has passed, I think it's fair to say, stuff has changed, business has grown. This is what we have to charge. I always frame it as this is what I have to charge going forward because this is what my business requires, because it makes it kind of harder for somebody else to come up and be like, well, I don't care what your business requires. This is what I'm willing to pay. So, yeah.
And one thing I've learned to make it a little bit easier is have an agreement with your client. Put an expiration date in the agreement. So like this agreement is good for 1 year. And then that gives you the opening to be like, hey, your agreement's coming up, the end of your agreement. Let's hop on a call to talk about it. And then you can choose keep the rate the same, or that gives you the opportunity to pitch a new rate.
I like that.
Yeah, that's what I do. I just recently started writing my contracts to switch to monthly at the end of the year, but then I wrote in the provision that I can go back at the end of the time and say, "Hey, we've been doing this for a year. The new rate is X." So that's literally written into the contract. It converts to monthly, and there may be a conversation about rate.
Yeah, that's totally what I started doing.
Because what I've found is it's hard for me to keep up with when the contracts end and schedule that call enough in advance to keep the contract current without having to like do some shenanigans. So I just thought, well, let's let it go to monthly and then I can just have the conversation.
I will say that one thing that has been really good for me has been changing to, I don't remember what they call it, but like plain language contracts. So I have the parts that has to do with the billing and that has to do with the like the client responsibilities and my responsibilities. It's just written in plain standard English with a heading says client responsibilities, payment fee, and it just says very in plain old English, not in the heretofore whether went to thing. So like I'm confident that the client can look at it before they sign it and easily digest, okay, this is what I'm signing. Because I felt a little bit weird when it was this, I originally had this jargony contract. I think I got it from like a freelancers association or something like that. Like who would really notice that in the middle of it, it said, oh, I can increase the fee after 1 year. It felt like I was trying to trick them with fine print. So by having the plain language of all that payment stuff, A, I realized that they actually noticed it more because they comment on it. And B, I felt better when it came time to come around and talk to it because it wasn't like something hidden in the middle of clause 2C somewhere.
Yeah. So how did you come up with that contract? Did you just decide to write it or did you base it off of something? Or?
Well, the base of it was I did keep that. I can't even remember where it was. It was one of those, those freelance associations that have like a ton of resources for people. I can't remember which one it was, but that was a baseline. And that has in all the necessary things about IP and all the confidentiality and all of that. And then based on, I think it was a recommendation from Evo Terra, I added on the things about the client responsibilities as just like bullet points. And I spoke to a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. I could be wrong. This could be the worst thing in the world if I had to litigate it. I don't know. But I spoke to a lawyer here, not in the US either. I spoke to a lawyer here. And he said to me that it should be fine because it's a clear agreement, basically. So you're agreeing to do A, I'm agreeing to do B for this amount of money. We're writing in plain English. So I just wrote it out in plain old English.
That's awesome. And yes, this is not legal advice. We are not lawyers. None of us have legal degrees. We're not okay. So, go talk to a lawyer. But
please do.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Michael Jerry had a comment. If I can get around my cat to click it. It is important to find the balance between what you charge and what you're doing. If you dread working on a client's project, is more money really going to make a difference? Or is what you're doing what matters?
If I can, I had said that I dreaded it. So I'll jump in there. I know at the time I was dreading it because I felt like she was taking advantage of me. So it had nothing to do with the content. But because she kept asking for more stuff and I'm a people pleaser, I never pushed back. So every time she asked for it, I'm be like, oh, how dare you ask me for this in my head. And just be like, yeah, sure, I'd love to do it. So by actually setting healthy boundaries in place, it made my work better. It made me feel better about the work. So yes, it's about what you're doing, but also, what do you guys say? The head trash? The head trash was getting in the way of the work that I was doing.
Yeah, you can't be angry at the client for like something you never had a conversation with them about.
How dare you not realize?
And Paul.
Oh, Paul's here. Hey, Paul.
Watching. He said I clicked the wrong one. Loving the conversation, need more open discussion and transparency in our space. And I feel like we have a lot of these conversations kind of in bursts, right? You get the bits and pieces of rates, in Facebook groups and such. But, that's one of the reasons. And that's why we started with that Twitter thread, because what should you really be looking? And here's my and this I'll frame this question to you guys too. Does it even matter what anybody else is charging when determining your own rates?
To an extent, in that if it encourages you to charge more, because so I started out like dirt cheap rates, um, and then like my clients actually encouraged me to charge more, and then it was finding the podcast editors club and seeing what other people were charging. It's like, oh, there is a market for me to charge a lot more than I am. So if other people's rates encourage you to raise yours, then yes, take that into account.
Yeah.
I would say that you have to pay a whole lot more attention to what others are charging if the market is already saturated with providers. If there are a lot of people already doing what you do, and you can start to be viewed as a commodity, then it's much more important to be familiar with what everybody else is charging and to be at some level, like the whole price elasticity thing. Am I too far above or too far below somebody else? But in a market that's not saturated, or if you're basically a category of one, probably not, right? Because you're not, like, you personally are not attracting the same clients that I attract. So we're not necessarily competing for the same business. And so what I charge isn't necessarily at all related to you. In fact, my packages include different things. So if they want what you offer, I'm not really an option for them.
Yeah. And Marion says, I feel like one of the big issues is scope of work. Editing means so many different things. And I think that is 100% true. There are so many pieces and styles to podcast editing and audio post-production in general that,
I want to, because we were talking about the thread on Twitter about like how much you should charge. And one of her things was like 20 hours at $85 an hour is this. And I'm like, I work on straight through talk shows. If an episode that I'm editing takes 20 hours, I have done something incredibly wrong, right? If, however, I'm doing what Carrie has started stepping into, doing narrative or storytelling or audio drama, 20 hours is absolutely not out of the question. And so, if I'm able to do for $150 or $200 or whatever I charge for one episode, if I stepped into the audio drama world and thought I was going to charge the same thing for an entire week's work, my family is going hungry and I'm going to lose the house. Like, it'll take about 3 months and we'll be done. Nothing left.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that, that kind of work, I think, is more of what Misha was talking about, that,
she did respond to the guy that specifically said plain. It was just a chat show for an hour. And she said, I think 800 or something like that. So.
Yeah,
I mean, again, I would go back to the scope of work. Like, what are you doing? Because producing an episode and editing an episode may mean something completely different to her than it does to him.
Right. Because I feel like that's so far, but like, again, where is the person making, let's just take like the average American family making 2 incomes. So they've got like $100,000 a year. And I don't know what the average income is. Are they going to be able to pay $3,200 a month? Which is like mortgage and it's like all their bills.
Right. That's like mortgage and food for a month.
Yeah.
For their hobby podcast.
Yeah.
So.
I don't see that happening. Like, I don't. And I get what she's saying. Like, as professionals, we don't want to be taken advantage of. And I don't want to drive down the price of, the industry work at all. I don't want to devalue anything, but I don't like, I don't know anybody in my personal life who could afford that. We couldn't afford that. The 4 of us together, the 3 of us together could not afford to have this show edited for $3,200 a month. Like, I'd have to quit. Y'all would have to,
You'll just go, just put the raw audio directly.
Yeah. That it'd just be done. Like, forget it,
I think I will say, to Brian's point about if it's saturated, one of the things that I have found interesting is the bad side of being a part of these lovely groups is that it makes me feel like this industry is saturated when my clients didn't even know that there was another podcast editor in the world apart from me. So like sometimes I have found myself having the imposter syndrome or the head trash or whatever, because I'm thinking, oh my God, Carrie's charging this, Brittany's charging this, whatever. Am I charging too much? Am I charging too little? Meanwhile, my client's just like, yo, my friend recommended you and you're the only person I know who does podcast anything. So they don't really care about what Jack, Jim, and John are charging. They just want to know what can they afford and what's valuable for them. So I wouldn't get too caught up in the market rate. I think what I always say is it's a good starting point. It's a good frame of reference, but I don't get married to it, because also especially like with the survey, it's an average. Some people are charging $10 and some people are charging $300. So don't peg everything in the market rate.
Yeah. And you can also use it as an anchor point, right? If you're talking to a client, and you can either use it as an anchor point to say, this is what others are charging and what I'm doing is in line with them. Or you could use it as an anchor point and say, this is what other people are charging. This is why my rate is higher than that.
Mm-hmm.
And use the price gap to differentiate yourself, which is something I think I need to start doing. So thanks for the idea.
Everybody do what Brian's doing. All right. Well, I think it is time for the pod decks question before Brian has to leave, because I was excited about the last one and we didn't get to do it.
Okay. So the pod decks question of the day, I really do have a pod deck. They sent it to me after I gave them money because that was how it works. So the question for today is, what's something that you've never been able to do well? And let's keep this podcast focused. So something that you've never been able to do well that's related to podcasts. And since I've had the question in front of me the longest and still haven't thought of an answer, I'll start. And I think the one thing that I tend to struggle with in terms of podcasting is, on a personal level, the promotion part of a podcast. I feel like I do a pretty good job with content and with preparation, and I feel like I do an excellent job with post-production. If you're thinking of hiring me, promotion is something where I'm looking to bring people in to help with that. And let's go to Daniel and go that way around back to Carrie.
For me, I'd probably say the preparation, because I get so focused like on other things, and it's like, oh, right, I should probably do my podcast. I'm probably the opposite of you, Brian. Not that I'm great at promotion, let's be honest.
Keep in mind, I have 2 shows that are on hiatus right now, so just take...
I think for me, it's the filler words. I get so upset when I hear them, but gosh darn, the editor's going to have a great time with this one. So yeah, filler words.
I'm gonna say like the marketing part. Like I was thinking about this for this show, was like, oh, I meant to do a newsletter the past 2 months.
The fact that you actually put out a newsletter is like,
that's
beyond me.
I do reminders that we're gonna have a live episode. However, the monthly newsletter. Y'all, I've just been busy and forgetful, because I forgot I wrote a newsletter for this show. Yeah.
Which you can sign up for at podcasteditorsmastermind.com.
Yes. In fact, that's also where you can go to subscribe to the show, or you can go to subscribe.podcasteditorsmastermind.com, and that will take you right to the page with all the little clicky buttons. So you don't even have to think, oh, do I have to search for this in my app? Just go there, click the buttons, you're good to go.
And by the way, the newsletter, never spammy. We never
if it happens.
email you without. We
it's
might
so
never
not spammy, you might not get it.
And it's been so great having Alexandra on the show tonight. And if you want to be on the show as well, whether you're an expert in the field and you want to share your knowledge, or you are struggling with something and you want help, all you got to do is go to podcasteditorsmastermind.com/be a guest, fill out the form, and eventually I'll realize that it is in my spam folder, and then I'll get back to you.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Alexandra, if people want to work with you, find out more about what you do for podcast editors, in terms of like business training, etc., where do they go?
The best place to find me is on Instagram at Alex.Stenett, which is STENNETT. And I know it looks dead, but I'm back. I'm coming back.
Okay. Yeah, me too.
DM me.
Me too. Yeah. And is there anything coming up in the future that we might find exciting?
Well, I'm hoping to be doing some talks in Justbusters group. So if you're not in the Justbusters group, you should get in there.
Absolutely. Yep. I think it's the 21st.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that would be
I haven't
the first
posted it
one.
yet, but if you are not a guy, come join Justbusters. You can go to justbusters.com and actually find out or search Justbusters on Facebook. Thank you so much for being with us, Alexandra. This has been super fun.
Thank you for having me. I had a good time.
Yeah, you can find Alexandra at listeners2clients.com or at alex.stenett on Instagram. The cat is attacking something. Sorry about that. I'm Carrie Caulfield. Eric, you can find me at Yaya Podcasting. You can find me at Yaya.
Nailed it. YayaPodcasting.com.
Or on Instagram at Carrie Eric. I'm Brian Edsminger. You can find me at toptieraudio.com or Top Tier Audio on most of the social media platforms, and to my whichever side is.
I'm Daniel Abendroth. You can find me at rothmedia.audio, or if you're a Reaper user, you could go to reaperforpodcasting.com for how-to videos.
We will see everybody next episode, I guess. Somebody's got to push the end broadcast button.
Yeah,
Thank you, everybody, for showing up and
I appreciate you guys.
So
how much is that?
So